And I think in particular we're interested in questions about practice and life and how to make the two increasingly into one. Peter.
Been reading Shantideva, and he and other writers very strongly talk about the evils, if you will, of anger, and how for umpteen lifetimes in the future, one moment of anger is likely to send one in places one wouldn't want to go. And the vividness with which the writers say that makes, in some ways, the whole practice rather discouraging, because I'm not quite sure that any of us have managed from childhood on to avoid anger at least one time, and probably more than that. So, given how firm they are on the destructiveness of anger to practice, and the commonness of that in my life at any rate, how do we balance those, resolve that issue?
Well, as you say, the answer can't be just don't get angry. You know, there's I don't find that I get to choose how I feel about things. It's sort of, that seems to be given to me. And so one of the things that's given to me frequently is anger, or irritation, or blaming, or judgment, or defensiveness. And in a painfully poignant way, it seems to arise most around the people that I'm closest to and care the most about. And I think the anger itself is not the problem. Or it is the problem, but more concerning is what you do with it. And also, with anger, one of the reasons it's so problematic is you tend to take it and run with it and do stuff with it before you even notice that that's what's happening. You can, well, I've met people where it seems they've lived their entire life caught in that. The consequences of having really taken anger and run with it. But from our practice, we know that, we experience that at some point you notice what you're doing. You sort of wake up in the middle of a distraction or in the midst of some action, or afterwards you realize, oh, look what just happened. And I think that's where you have some opportunity, some purchase. And that's the point where you have an opportunity to practice. And then what you practice in that moment is what will grow stronger in the future. So you can practice saying, well, no, I was right and that other person was wrong, and these are all the reasons why. What I did, I didn't mean anything by it. My intentions were good. That person's a jerk. So practicing self-justification would be my personal number one strategy for dealing with anger. But now, because I've been practicing this for so long, I notice myself doing it and I can't take it seriously anymore. It's embarrassing. And so at some level you just have to be, in a very kind way, amused by your own craziness. But at the moment that you notice that you've been angry or acted in anger or done something that you may regret, that is exactly the point of your practice right there. And there are lots of things that our practice teaches us that we can do with it at that moment. The most powerful and the most difficult is to merely experience it. Without judgment or blame or grasping or aversion. To bring as much of your presence to bear in the moment as you can. That anger and those emotions and all of that is trying to communicate something to you. And that something is not that anger is bad or that you're a bad person for being angry. That's not the message. A step down from that would be to do Tonglen practice. My advice would be to do it for yourself at that moment. To breathe in that feeling. And when you breathe out, breathing out something kind that you have for yourself. And if that becomes too small, then starting to think about all of the other people in the world ask anybody, they'll say, yeah, we get angry too. It's our birthright. And then a third step away from that is merely to not, don't act it out. Refrain from action so that you're sort of in damage control mode. And that's also a very good thing. But not acting it out doesn't mean stuffing it. That's not the point. So finding a way later, after you've cooled down a little, to bring what happened into your practice is really important.
Well, thank you. I'm thinking about the part of your question that referred to Shantideva's kind of strong stance against anger. Like one moment of anger will destroy, all of your good merit. In a certain way, that's why we dedicate our merit. We do those dedication prayers, because then we sort of seal it in our minds and give it away. We kind of recommit over and over to create positive actions, thoughts, words in the world. The Buddha said that, the mind is the forerunner of everything. So when, the way I've been taught about Shantideva and folks who talk very strongly about anger is, it's a certain level of practice. It's not for everyone. But if you have that shtick, then it's really good for you to be firm against it, Yours might be attachment, it might be constant despair or sadness. We have to see in our mind, be our doctor to our mind. What's my mind like? Where do I get stuck over and over? For me, it's generally attachment. Yeah, grab. So I have to work on that, like see the suffering in attachment, see it in anger, if that's my chronic thing. See it in I'm sad all the time, sad, see the suffering in that. But these kind of teachings, like you'll end up in a hell realm, are tricky for us. And Shantideva goes at it that way. They're tricky for us because our Judeo-Christian thing comes and, we're either like this or that doesn't apply to me. We can't find how to use them. So one teacher was saying, well, the way you use it is, have you, as Erik was referring to at one point in his comment, ever met someone who kind of lives in that hell realm of anger pretty much all the time? And I see some nods, like when I was a young lawyer, I met a lot of people like that. They're caught in a situation and that's their response. Angry when they come, angry when they talk to you, and angry when they leave. And that's a hell realm. And they're living in it. And the attachment piece is more like living in a hungry ghost realm. There's always a hole in the middle and a big belly and a teeny. These are all metaphors, a teeny throat, and you can't, even food's around, you can't get enough. That's kind of a hungry ghost realm, attachment. So it's not like there's necessarily this outside environment we get thrown in, like Judeo-Christian teaching. It's our mind. Are we creating the hell? And there's some it comes to this piece about the three turnings. In the middle turning, there's a lot more of apply the antidote, see the suffering in it, apply the antidote, see the suffering in anger, see the disadvantages of it, apply the antidote of patience, kind of very like, I'm going to apply this. Those are a certain level of teachings and a certain level of steps. I have found them very happy. I mean, very, very helpful and more happy. Yes. Yeah, not very happy necessarily while you're doing it, but happy result. And then there's other tools like just see it, just see it. And Erik's kind of pointing more at those. So there are different tools in a very big tool chest. For some people, that's very helpful. I don't want to live in a hell realm in my own mind. So I will really, the minute I see that cranking up, I feel it physically first, heat, and if I can get, and the calm abiding helps to see that early. And if I can catch it early, I don't have to go all the way to slap in your face, and then regretting, and then wars, come from that slapping. I don't have to go there. So it's just another tool, those kind of things he's saying. Imagine it's so bad it will wreck all your merit. Imagine that. Well, then you get very careful about it. You don't just let it slide around, slippy slidey. Yeah, that's how I see it. Probably have some.
Yes, briefly. I think this is a great question on a lot of levels. I've now had time to kind of chew it over. But what you mentioned about this is not like this kind of external circumstance that you need to kind of read the contract and I really don't know, I can't read the fine print, I'll just sign it. You can actually look at your own experience and see a lot of this. And as I was reflecting on what you both said, I can see in my own experience that both the cultivation of compassion and insight is exceptionally powerful as well. But when I go to anger and then kind of settle on the self-justification and all the rest of it, that does have this carryover effect that I come back to very readily. I come back to that over and over again. And so all my kindness and compassion practice, it has a feeling, oh yes, things are going pretty well doing this, but there's a little bit of, what have you done for me lately? It's just not dramatic enough. But the anger, when I go into that, it feels like, oh, now I'm getting somewhere. And it does kind of go, obliterate everything else. And it's very easy to go back to that groove. It's very easy to go back to that groove. So I can understand it kind of in more in immediate experiential terms. But I think it's also for people who have a very sort of a very clear sense of you have sort of a cosmological sense of the outcomes of actions in the future, and you have the idea of these kinds of realms of experience. Then I think it's very helpful to kind of, well, what kind of map do I want to follow? Or do I want to, what am I going to do? But I think one of the things that's missing for me in kind of the original is the context of the potency of our practice of loving kindness and compassion and insight. That those practices are kind of in the big picture more powerful. Otherwise, practice just could not work.
It seems like such a great topic for the time that I will add, even though well covered. I was thinking of two things that I rely on, or kind of forms of mind training that I use. We have so many possibilities, as has been mentioned. But one is that as I see myself feeling angry, I will take my mind to looking at people, person, whatever that I'm angry with, what are their motivations? And asking myself, and what are the things that led them to the place that they're at, that I feel in conflict with? And as I start to do that, I think, well, that person, maybe it's a nameless voter somewhere, so I don't even know them. But I can think, well, they're like my cousin so-and-so, or, could be whatever, my next door neighbor, could be this or that, and who I like, and they could be having similar thoughts to that nameless voter that I was angry at, but now when I start thinking of them as someone I have some good relationship with too, then I think of them more kindly and more, so I think, and I do feel that people, Buddhist point of view, think causes and conditions go way back, and they act through the world, and they keep acting through the world, and outcomes, here's what comes out, we see that, but it's got its roots in all, whatever that voter, their whole life experience, and from a Buddhist point of view, even a previous life experience, and that's led these, someone to where they are right now, just as it has me. So that helps me kind of defuse my anger. And then the other thing is looking at the anger sort of more personally. I can often, and this is given, I have time to, that I'm not just like still in the situation, I'm somewhere thinking about it. I can reflect on why am I, what's under my anger? Why does it feel good to sort of, like blast it out there? Is it because I feel so helpless that I can't, that I'm unable to change a situation, or I feel afraid of what's going to happen, or I'm feeling, there's something under, or I'm feeling that, someone's not respecting me, or it's, something is going on under my anger. I can almost always find that, and as I find that, I still feel bad, but it's more like I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling, hurt, or I'm feeling fearful, but I realize that that anger is coming out of there, and that's sort of an unnecessary, it's an unhelpful layer to put on top of difficulties that I already have.
Diane, did you want to say something?
I dealt with anger for a long time after my head injury, and I got really sick of it, but I didn't let go of it until I decided to try Ringo Tulku's advice, which is that it's probably hurting me a lot more than it's hurting the woman I'm angry at. And I reluctantly tried that, and I'm sure it was true. But what I really didn't expect to happen was that freeing myself from the anger gave me a real sense of power over the whole situation that I hadn't had before. That energy that went into the anger mode could now be used in constructive mode, to get out of the problems and get out of the injuries and so on and so forth. And I think, his little book on anger says it very succinctly. I think it's really, really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great, that sort of brings it around to why anger itself is not bad. It is our life energy manifesting. And if we don't recognize what it really is, we tend to direct it in ways that are destructive, or really suppress it and make ourselves powerless. So thank you for sharing that. Holly.
We had this question come up at the last young adult group, and we were going to ask Ngutolku, but it's coming up again, so I'll just ask it. It's about practicing with one's own afflictions, emotional afflictions, and like the sort of aversion, or I don't know if that's the right word, but like disgust, or like I'm just tired of them. And, you know, like, okay, I'm ready to let that go. Like, how can I work toward planting seeds of other experiences and practicing differently? But when that happens, especially in the Mahayana, where there are these aspirations that are so vast, endless compassion, endless, like, there's a certain potential in human experience that also subtly raises my expectation of human behavior. And it, in myself, it's like a nice thing to work with, like, okay, how can I respond to this differently? How can I expand myself in this situation? How can I stay open? And so these motivations can be very uplifting and helpful, but subtly I actually start to become more disappointed in myself and other people when we don't meet those expectations. And so the question is, how do I increase my tolerance or compassion for the afflictions of others and myself, while also working to mitigate them?
What would your last part be? To mitigate them.
Mitigate,
Or
thank you. Mitigate the afflictions.
Okay.
Wow. That's a nuanced question.
That's what happens when somebody's had a while to really chew on a question. It's the fastball comes flying inside.
Well, the last thing you said was mitigate, what was the last thing? Mitigate
The afflictions.
the afflictions. Okay. Do you want to mitigate the afflictions, or do you want to be rid of them?
Being rid of them. I think, I don't know if it's helpful, but I think the key, like, tension is in taking practice seriously. I see, and this is what I heard in the group, that there's so much potential for being free. And so then how to take that potential seriously, while also somehow increasing my tolerance for continued suffering.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
The latter is a no-win proposition. You won't make samsara tolerable. It is not. You can't, through perfecting yourself, come to a place where samsara works and where it's satisfactory. That is our normal approach. we try to avoid suffering, and we try to move in ways that feel better. And that was the Buddha's great insight, that tendency is none other than the root of suffering itself. And so the universe is very generous. Until you arrive at the point where you cut that root, where you understand that it's not this is good, that is bad, this person is good, that person is bad, this outcome is good, that outcome is bad. Until you arrive at that point, dissatisfaction will continue, and it's there as your lifeline to wake you up. And, well, not sure I can put my finger on it quickly enough. My favorite framing of what you're describing, which is close. Yeah, I missed it. Well, I'm not going to get it perfectly, but it's T.S. Eliot's poem from lines from Four Quartets, which is that you travel all this way only to find yourself back at the place where you started. But you see with new eyes. And that keeps happening if you're on a genuine path until you get it. But in the meantime, yeah, it's disappointing. There's disappointment. Thank goodness there's disappointment. Otherwise, you just go back to sleep.
I just think of the shorthand which says the same thing, of practice with no hope, no fear. We hold the truth of our Buddha nature. Just hold it. Don't do anything with it, just hold it in mind. And then practice. No hope, no fear. The analogy is really apt of someone training for something. You do 1,000 pole vaults and 900 of them are crappy. But those crappy ones made the 10% of wow. And while you're doing those 900, you're not like, oh, I better stop, because we can go there. I better stop because these aren't working. You just hold that. No, I think I can do one of these, but not like grabbing it. just hold it with the beauty. I have Buddha nature. That's so amazing. I don't feel it a lot of the days, but I've got it anyway. I am it. And so that's just to be held. Don't grab. The minute we grab and try and none with it, it's more stuff in between. It's a great question. Just keep going with the experience of that. That's what we're all doing.
The word tolerable in this question was a wonderful key. And if I just shifted the word tolerable to resilience, how do I find resilience in my practice in the midst of this? It becomes a question that you can actually approach that in a practical way. And Erik's immediate point about the tolerableness, it is this kind of like, how am I gonna get the situation so I sort of get it under control in some way, somehow. But the resilience, finding the resilience on the path is a critical thing. And it is true, the more we hear, the more we get into it, the more we go, oh dear, or another word that goes after oh. I start to see what the situation is. But the more we can actually appreciate the potential and appreciate the character and the way that we can apply the methods of all the turnings, whether it's the approach of just seeing that these kinds of strategies don't work and others are more helpful, or to really stepping into the realm of kind of deep compassion and starting to work with that. Each one of these, or whether it's just a simple recognition, each one of these approaches will have its own challenges, which will have the oh dear part of it to it. But the more we can kind of have that kind of this is Erik's perspective of kind of stepping kind of all the way to the end of the line, and then you go, oh, I see. There's a way through this, and there are things that I can do. Then that aspect, Michael talks a lot about confidence, which in this sense I'm also very close to the way I used the word resilience. That there's a way to work with this. It won't necessarily feel tolerable along the way, but that, as Erik said, that's part of the lifeline. If it starts to feel tolerable, a lot of times it just means we've upped our dose of anesthetic.
Yeah.
That's right.
We're kind of coming to the end of our time, and I brought something that I wanted to read. And I don't know where it came, I don't know why I picked this, but it just sort of popped out. And looking around the room, and in particular, what's striking to me is, and people in the streaming can't necessarily see this, but the incredible proportion of people here today who are women is really noticeable to me. And so, lucky for me, I didn't bring something from Iron John.
Next Sunday.
What I brought is sort of from maybe the feminist version of that guy. So this is called "We Were Made for These Times." It's by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. We were made for these times. My friends, do not lose heart. We were made for these times. I have heard from so many recently who are deeply and properly bewildered. And keep in mind, this was written in 1992, I think. They are concerned about the state of affairs in our world now, Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most to civilized visionary people. You are right in your assessments. The luster and hubris some have aspired to, while endorsing acts so heinous, she had no idea, against children, elders, everyday people, the poor, the unguarded, the helpless, is breathtaking. Yet, I urge you, ask you, gentle you, to please not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Especially do not lose hope. Most particularly because the fact is that we were made for these times. Yes. For years, we have been learning, practicing, been in training for, and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. I grew up on the Great Lakes and recognize a seaworthy vessel when I see one. Regarding awakened souls, there have never been more able vessels in the waters than there are right now across the world. And they are fully provisioned and able to signal one another as never before in the history of humankind. Look out over the prow. There are millions of boats of righteous souls on the waters with you. Even though your veneers may shiver from every wave in the stormy royal, I assure you that the long timbers composing your prow and rudder come from a greater forest. That long-grained lumber is known to withstand storms, to hold together, to hold its own, and to advance, regardless. In any dark time, there's a tendency to veer towards fainting over how much is wrong or unmended in the world. Do not focus on that. There's a tendency to fall into being weakened by dwelling on what is outside your reach, by what cannot yet be. Do not focus there. That is spinning the wind without raising the sails. We are needed, that is all we can know. And though we meet resistance, we more so will meet great souls who will hail us, love us, and guide us. And we will know them when they appear. Didn't you say you were a believer? Didn't you say you pledged to listen to a voice greater? Didn't you ask for grace? Don't you remember that to be in grace means to submit to the voice greater? Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. One of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. The light of the soul throws sparks, can send up flares, builds signal fires, causes proper matters to catch fire. To display the lantern of soul in shadowy times like these, to be fierce and to show mercy towards others, both are acts of immense bravery and great necessity. Struggling souls catch light from other souls who are fully lit and willing to show it. If you would help to calm the tumult, this is one of the strongest things you can do. There will always be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but I do not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. The reason is this: in my uttermost bones, I know something, as do you. It is that there can be no despair when you remember why you came to earth, who you serve, and who sent you here. The good words we say and the good deeds we do are not ours. They are the words and deeds of the one who brought us here. In that spirit, I hope you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt. But that is not what great ships are built for. That's We Were Made for These Times by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Thank you all for your attention. Dedicate the merit. By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Miriam.